give it up for our next keynote speaker.
So, I'm Bryce. I'm going to give a description of myself for my blind friends. I am a disheveled, middle-aged white guy with a big bushy beard who, I must admit, is feeling a little bit nervous because I am a Microsoft guy here today, and I am not here to talk to you about business or AI. I feel very out of place. I'm here today to talk to you about personalization and altruism. Okay? So, my talk here is on devices, accessories, and augmentations. An alternative title for this talk is Designing for the Disabled When Fit is the Finish. I am an industrial designer. I love that pun. Fit is the finish. So, as we sort of said, I run this facility called the Microsoft Inclusive Tech Lab. We've been open about 7 years. You know, we started this place as a very traditional empathy lab, trying to get understanding into our development community about the disabled community, but we have evolved over time to be the place on the Microsoft campus where we bring in the disability community to co-design our products with us, right? We believe in nothing about us without us. And it's really important for us, for folks to come in and kind of work with us on these products. Because if we don't, we're not going to be able to meet their needs. Our mission at Microsoft is to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. That is literal. Every person, right? When we do not intentionally include the disabled in the products that we create, we are actively working against our mission. So we need this place. I'm sure many of you have used a Microsoft product in the past and wondered who the hell designed this thing, right? And I will tell you it was us, sitting on our campus, talking to each other. We need to go out into the world, and we need to make sure that we're interacting with communities, especially ones that don't get the attention that they deserve. So, I'm going to start this talking about game controllers. This is the Xbox controller, the greatest game controller that you can get. Your opinions may vary on game controllers, but they would be wrong. This is the best controller. I love my Xbox controller. But if we look at this product through the lens of recognizing exclusion, we have to address some challenges with it. Game controllers have been optimized over many generations around a primary use case, and that use case made assumptions. It assumes that people have two hands to hold it. It assumes that people have two thumbs for the sticks and a fluid range of motion to get to those buttons. Game designers assume that people can hit multiple buttons at the same time. Right? It assumes that we have the reach with our index fingers to hit those bumpers and triggers. And it assumes that we have the strength and the endurance and the grip to hold it. And what we had to recognize at Xbox was that if someone couldn't use this product, they couldn't play Xbox. We were creating the barrier. That is the social model of disability. That is the responsibility of designers. I love the social model of disability. There's many models of disability. But I love the social model of disability because it puts the responsibility on us. If like someone has a mismatch in interactions between the products that we design and the situations that they are in, it is our responsibility to fix it, okay? So we created the Xbox Adaptive Controller. I'm not sure if you're all familiar with it. These are some pictures of it being used by people with various types of disabilities, from quadriplegia to limb difference to cerebral palsy. There's someone in there who's got muscular dystrophy. We call this the adaptive controller because it adapts to you and not you to it, right? It is modular. You can design it. So if you cannot press a button with your hands because you do not have fingers, we can put a button where you have movement. We put buttons on people's feet. We put buttons on people's knees. We put buttons on people's elbows. We have taped buttons to people's eyebrows, okay? So that's how we think about it. And it is also vitally important to us in our practice, and it all kind of works together that we engage with these folks in various disability communities to understand their needs and to think about how we can design systems that can kind of stretch out through a lot of this. And I will be getting into more of this in the workshop tomorrow if you guys want to come to that. So this is the Microsoft Adaptive Accessories. This is us taking what we've learned from the controller and applying it to mouse and keyboard. And I'm going to show this video here of my friend April, but these are the adaptive accessories, and I'm just going to get off so you can watch that video.
Ability Powered is a blog that I run for disabled gaming. Focuses on assistive technology just to get gamers playing games. Why are there chickens? So with the Microsoft Adaptive Ecosystem software, I can really set my switches to be app specific. So if I'm working on my website, I can copy and paste with just one button. Or if I'm in a video game, I can make one button cast fireballs. I can really set it up to do anything I need, no matter if I'm working or playing.
The Microsoft Adaptive Input ecosystem is very adaptable and very customizable. Almost every part of it you can swap so that you create a setup that is unique to you. It is one size fits one.
The more buttons that you have access to, the more things you can do in a game. You can customize the toppers. So for me, I'm going to use it with my cheek. That made me be able to go from 2 actions to 8 actions, just with adding a joystick. It's been completely life-changing.
So yeah, it's my friend April. Sadly, she's no longer with us, but you know, it's interesting to think about how she thinks about input, right? And April's been with us a long time. You know, I think it's really important to recognize that her needs evolve over time, which is also why modularity becomes super important, because we're not just designing for like where you are at right now, we're designing for where you'll be in the future. So what I'm going to show you today is built off of the Microsoft Inclusive Design Methods. These are 3 principles of the Microsoft Inclusive Design Methods: recognize exclusion, learn from diversity, solve for one, extend to many. I'll be going into this into real depth tomorrow. But remember, recognizing exclusion, we had to recognize that our game controller was the barrier to people with disabilities because it assumed that you would only use it a certain way. Learn from diversity. We engage with communities. You know, we believe in nothing about us without us. We have a facility on the campus that's dedicated to trying to live up to this ideal. And solve for one, extend to many. Quickly, this is the idea that when you design a product for the disabled, you're making a product better for everyone, which is absolutely true. And I absolutely agree with that. For me in my practice, because all my customers are disabled, I think about the interrelated needs of disability. And I think about how we use design synthesis to come up with solutions that can meet those interrelated needs through adaptation, right? And that's really what this kind of work is about, is this idea of how do we use synthesis to basically create these objects that can be more than one thing, right? So digital and physical, one size fits one. You heard Gabby mention in the video, one size fits one. I think what's really interesting is we talk, you know, I know this event is mostly about digital products, but I hate to break it to you, as people, you need an interface to get to the digital currently. You know, I mean, I think it's all pretty scary when we don't need that physical interface anymore, but you know, we can certainly talk about that later. But I do recognize that most people interact with physical products, and they have equal digital experiences that are part of it. So it's important to remember that these things are intertwined, right? And to kind of get into that, you know, we do believe that modern products are intertwined with the digital and physical. And to do that, we must think about flexibility and adaptability, right? This is a quote from my boss. He says, if accessibility is the solution, then disability is the opportunity. Disability is complex, so we must design flexible solutions. And that's my boss, Dave Dame. He has a wonderful TED Talk. You should go check it out, you know, if you want to see that. This is also an advocate that was super important to our work, Tyler Schrenk. It's really important to kind of recognize the people that we interact with along the way. So, devices, accessories, and augmentations. People interact with computers in infinite ways across infinite contexts and functions of human diversity. Tailoring adaptive systems of input and output that fit will empower the disabled. So, when we think about this work, we really think about trying to balance perceivability, operability, understandability to create these robust systems. And if there are any web accessibility people in the room and they recognize those terms, perceivability, operability, understandability, robust, those are the 4 underlying principles of the WCAG, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. And I am stealing them here because they are good, right? And I think that it's important to kind of use these as framing for how we think about it. Now, I think one of the important things to kind of recognize about hardware solutions, I always like to remind my colleagues back at Microsoft that work on software that we call it shipping software, right? I shipped it, right? But when you're in hardware and you ship something, it gets on a boat and it goes across an ocean, right? So it's very different to how we kind of think about agility and product development as we think about these kinds of things. So I'm going to get into the principles. This is the first principle. Awareness is essential. People with disabilities are the true experts in the barriers that they face, yet they might not always be aware of the solutions or designs that can help overcome or eliminate those barriers. So I mean this because I think it's always really challenging to get people to understand how products that are built for them actually can apply to them. And what I mean by that is that we all exist in this world where things are just thrown at us all the time. So I much more often see people with disabilities adapting themselves to a typical product than I do the other way around. And I understand that. And, when we celebrate their achievement and we celebrate their sort of tenacity, but it's not the best thing to approach from a design perspective. And the reason why I have this principle as the first one is honestly, I need this one the most. This is for me, because it's very easy for us as designers and engineers to kind of get into building stuff, right? And be enamored with what we're building. But to kind of feed off of what Donald said yesterday, awareness is really important. And so I really liked what he said, sell the problem and not the solution, right? That really resonated with me, because I will tell you, for the adaptive controller, when I show it to most people, and I'm sure a lot of you in here have never seen it before, and that's cool. I understand. And people come up to me and they go, this is great. You should market this better. And then I show them our 2019 Super Bowl ad for the adaptive controller. And I go, I don't know if marketing is the answer for these communities. So I like the idea of selling. I think we talk about sales and marketing quite often as the same thing, but I'm actually really leaning into lately the idea of no, participate in communities, work with them, sell them how this works, right? And I think that's really kind of the answer. Sophisticated and straightforward approaches. The disabled have a rich history of augmenting objects to fit their needs, embracing accessibility through innovation. Quality modifications, not necessarily high tech, is their rightful expectation. Okay. Very often in my lab, I do joke, but it's very true, that my biggest competitor is duct tape and cardboard, right? People just hacking their stuff to make it work in their lives. And I have seen people who have taken our Surface devices, particularly people who are blind, and they've sort of scarred up their keyboards, because if you think about keyboards, it's actually a really tricky thing, and I'll get into that in a bit. They've scarred up their keyboards with glue and all this stuff to make them more usable for them, right? They've augmented them, and those augmentations are frankly trash, and people deserve nice things, right? So this is actually a silicone cover from a partner of ours called JC Powell, and it fits over our Surface keyboard. It provides high contrast text. It provides large print, right? And it's color coded. Can anyone guess what the color coding's for? And just shut it out. Sorry, I shouldn't have done that, because now everyone, sorry. Well, yeah, so color blindness is a good answer, but it's not quite that. If you notice the color on here, the vowels are different colors than the consonants. The numbers are a different color than. So can anyone think of where that color affordance can kind of go? Sorry? Yeah, they're all, but what kind of disability do you think would benefit from this type of color? Yep, there you go. Learning disabilities, cognitive disabilities, right? Absolutely. And because of color blindness, it's often said in design, don't design with color blindness. It's very simplistic. That's rubbish. Color is a wonderful affordance for the disabled. Just know how to use it, right? Adjustments are augmentations. So, ergonomics began in World War II, adapting equipment design to human capacities for better efficiency and safety. Products designed to be adjusted have built-in augmentation. So, ergonomics started in World War II. Let's talk about that for just a second. Okay, there was this thing in the U.S. Air Force after World War II where they took the average user and they basically designed a cockpit around the average number of pilots. They had 1,000 pilots. They took their average measurements. They designed a cockpit around the average. Planes were crashing all over the place. They couldn't figure out if it was pilot error until a scientist came out and actually measured those 1,000 pilots and compared those measurements against the average. And the reality was no one was average, right? So by making them average exclusively, they were literally designing for no one, okay? And that was the birth of modern ergonomics. That's why when you buy a car, you don't buy a small, medium, or large car, right? Your seats adjust, and that adjustment makes it usable to you, right? It makes it fit you. So there's a photo here of our Xbox Elite Controller 2, which actually has a stick tension adjustment, which I really like, which basically makes it so that the stick can be a lot stiffer for people who have higher strength and higher tone. And what's interesting about that is sometimes that resistance gives people precision, right, with that type of disability. So it's important to kind of, again, think about how that adjustments are augmentation. There's a renowned disability advocate named Todd Stableford, and he's a quadriplegic, so he has no use of his hands. So he typically does a lot of things with his mouth. And so he says a lot of the time that, the difference between usability and non-usability for him can sometimes just be a couple millimeters, right? So this type of adjustment is really important. Next principle, configuration is augmentation. Guys sensing a theme? Contemporary products blend physical and digital experiences. Personalization emerges through configuration. I believe, and this might be bold of me, that accessibility can be thought of as personalization that accounts for human diversity. Okay? So that's sort of a little sort of stake in the ground that I make in the practice that we do, is that that's all really accessibility is. So when you configure a product and you make it fit you, you bring all these things that allow you to kind of adjust it so that it suits your needs. There's a well-known gaming disability advocate named Darren Thompson, and they say, this is very provocative, that all video game settings are accessibility settings. And their point of view is that if the game designer designed a game a certain way and you need to change it to fit you, that's accessibility. I think the same thing can be said about things like responsive design. As a design practice, we've talked about responsive design for years being this idea that the form fits the device form factor. And I just think that's rubbish, right? If I can't see a desktop website on my phone, that's accessibility, right? It's the situation that I'm in, right? I happen to be using this form. So all of this stuff around configuration, I think, is super important. This next principle, physical augmentation is not required. In certain cases, purpose-built devices and accessories offer the best solution without the need for additional augmentation, while benefiting from adjustability and configurability. So I don't want to show up here and basically kind of talk about people sticking things to their devices and having that as a solution. Again, people with disabilities deserve nice things. So there's a Surface laptop on the table and there's a device in front of it. Does anyone know what that device is? Yeah, it's a Braille reader. Yeah. So it's a Braille device, refreshable Braille display for people who are blind, right? If you've ever seen Braille on a sign, I think the one thing that most designers don't recognize about Braille is one size. There's no large print or small print Braille. There's just Braille. right? And what's really cool about that, and if any of you locals are here, man, I would urge you to go to the Devnar School for the Blind and what they're doing there. It is incredible. Every time I'm in town, I go there because I really they're just amazing what they're doing at that place. And if you've ever seen a book printed out in Braille, the American Printing House for the Blind has this really great illustration of how important Braille is. And it kind of goes with this device. Actually, I want to give you one more piece of info before I tell you this APH story. Can anyone guess how much that Braille reader is? I'll tell you, it's a hard guess, and it's going to shock you. It's about $2,500 US, right? But I will tell you that every blind person I know that has one of these would sooner lose their computer than that Braille display, right? It's a very important piece of technology to them. And American Printing House for the Blind has this ad where they basically show a woman with her calculus textbook that's printed out in Braille. And it's a stack of binders that's as tall as her and half as tall as her. And that's one textbook. And that textbook probably costs $2,000 to print out, right? So that's why I'm also talking about Devnar, because they had this amazing Braille printing facility that's incredible. But yeah, Braille is really kind of important. Sorry, I felt like I went on a bit of a tangent there. But no, it is. So having devices that are purpose-built for the disabled are important. And while I am always trying to think about how we can synthesize solutions to meet the broadest number of needs of people that we can, I am very sort of thankful that these purpose-built devices exist. And I don't want to imply that they shouldn't, right? The other thing about Braille that you might not know, Braille is literacy to the blind. So if you've all heard someone use a screen reader to have something read back to you, the synapses that fire in your brain when you read as a sighted person don't necessarily fire as well when someone is listening to content, but they do fire when they're reading it with Braille. So Braille, the important thing to remember for the blind community, and the reason why Braille is so important, is that Braille is literacy. So what am I going to ask you to do? Oh, we're going to have lots of time for questions. That's cool. Continuously engage the disabled. When I talk to students and they want to get into this work, the first thing I ask them is, who do you know that's disabled? And if they tell me that they don't, I tell them very sternly, better go meet some. There is no inclusive design for the disabled without interacting with the disabled. So, understanding the breadth of challenges with your design, and there's lots of great works out there. We mentioned WCAG earlier. All these things are important, but they're just foundational pieces. And as designers, they're not enough. We have to go interact with people with disabilities. Design to extend to many. So none of our products exist in isolation. Like, people learn the interfaces that we create because they've used similar interfaces somewhere else. So when we have to think about the fact that everything that we make exists in a broader world, and so as someone who, again, typically does industrial design, it's very tricky for me to think about, how these augmentations can kind of work through a lot of this stuff. So publish examples. I think as part of that, awareness is essential. People with disabilities need to see someone like them using the product that you've designed for them, right? And I will tell you, we try to do the best that we can there, but it's never enough. I never have enough examples, right? And so again, I think, we need to embrace different ways of communicating these things and building these communities so that others can basically do that. And then share success stories, amplify the voices of those who've found empowerment through the things that you've made. Their narratives can inspire others, right? It's really important. So that's the end. And I'm going to move. There's some links there that folks can kind of take a picture of. That first one, no, actually, shoot, I didn't put a link in here for it. Come see me afterwards. If you all want a tour of the Inclusive Tech Lab, I would gladly give you a remote tour of the Inclusive Tech Lab when I'm back in Seattle. But please, come do that. But this is the material for devices, accessories, and augmentations. And thank you. I hope that was informative, and I'd love to take some questions.